Okay, we are live. This is a random hangout with my old buddy Chad from Chad's Attic, since I didn't get to visit him in Maine this year.
That's right. Darn.
Go climb up in the attic again and sweat with Chad. I miss that.
Yeah, well, if you'd come this time of year, it would be much nicer. Hopefully next year, you can schedule a trip around. You can schedule a trip around to Boston Comic Con and hang out.
Yeah, or I was thinking, wasn't there a con that you went down to in Connecticut?
I've not gone to one in Connecticut.
Or were you thinking of it? There was some con that's on at an Indian.
Oh yeah. There's some. They
really good.
Occasionally have big cons at the Mohegan Sun, and I've never been.
Right.
But they have a lot of really good pros of the era that I'm interested in. More interested in, and because of the proximity to New York, Connecticut is easy to get to from a lot of different places.
Right. And my mom lives in Connecticut, so maybe someday we could time meeting up at that.
I'd love it.
Or I could drive up to Portland also.
Yeah. Next summer, cross your fingers. So anyway, we already talked about how.
Well, tell me. Let's go back to what you were telling me about Conan.
Oh, I
interrupted you on that, so I'd like to get the whole.
So now that we're all stuck at home with COVID, and I've been very close to home, I've been digging into back issues a lot that I've acquired, because for me, sometimes I have more capacity for acquiring comics than I do for consuming them.
Believe me, I know that.
So I have these
problem
big boxes of to be read. And if we want, some of them are down here, the stuff that I keep down here. And one of the things I went back to recently was some Conan issues in the mid 90s, I believe, around the time that Belit was his wife.
Published in the mid 90s?
No, right? The numbers of the issues.
The numbers in the 90s. Yes, that makes sense.
She was.
Seems like he maybe met Belit maybe around issue 50 or 60, and then they continued on till 100 at least.
Yeah, and so I've read like 3 issues in that series recently. Just picked them out of the box because they looked fun at the time, and there was John Buscema, whose art is amazing, but the reproduction in those issues is terrible.
Yes.
I really would love to see those reprinted nicely. Or I'm sure they have been. I just don't have it.
Marvel's doing omnibuses of them on nice paper.
Yeah, so that's like $100 for the giant thing.
$50 a pop when you go on In Stock Trades.
Okay, good. And so there's a John Buscema issue where Belit and Conan are kind of leading a raid into the city where Belit's uncle has taken over, stolen her crown per se.
Right. And
then right in the middle, there's this Sal Buscema fill-in. Which I really, really liked. I mean, his artwork looked to me, after seeing, John Buscema is singular and amazing, but that one Sal Buscema issue, and I can't say that I've spent a lot of time reading a lot of Sal Buscema Marvel stuff. I feel like he's done a lot of titles that I didn't pay a lot of attention to. Was he like the Defenders guy?
He was the Defenders guy for a good long stretch. He was, later he was Spectacular Spider-Man. And then earlier he was Captain America and Rom the Space Knight.
Oh, right. That started with Ditko, though, right?
No, Ditko just came in at some point. I think it was mostly Sal Buscema.
Okay. Anyway, so looking at him doing Conan, it just seemed like his art was a little bit of a throwback, somewhere between like some of the really good sort of late Golden Age artists, or maybe a little kind of indie-ish in that particular context. And I really liked it. I mean, I liked them both, but that one in particular, I was
and you didn't recall who the inker was on that?
I didn't, and I don't have it
here.
A
different one.
I don't know. Apparently, John probably needed a month off in that issue, and I really, I don't know. I dug that one a lot. I kind of enjoyed it with a couple around it.
We have 4 people watching, 3 in the comments. Hey, Stay Puff, Sean, Black Manta says hello, and Jack Yo is on his way home and hopes to catch more. So I guess he saw a little bit on his phone while driving or something. But Jack has been around a long time. Stay Puft has a great channel. I don't know who Black Manta is. I don't think. But, maybe I will in the future.
See, normally I'm in the attic, but I don't have a computer in the attic, and I also don't have my webcam set up in the attic. So
it would take you some time to do a live stream from the attic.
It takes me a little time to do recorded stuff in the attic because I'm such a stickler for the technology.
And as you were saying, you're not getting a lot of views, but I am loving your return to the attic in the last three videos. At first, I missed them in my stream, and then I saw the last one and I watched them.
Well, I've tried the box dive thing, just dig in and see what kind of weird things are in between these long runs of titles, and that can be fun. Although occasionally, the worst part is I do a lot of editing after.
And you wore a camera on your forehead.
I did. Do I have it here? I do. Well, this is.
Gore Vidal is here. Hey, Gore, another great long-time YouTuber.
Yeah, it's the GoPro Hero 8. This is the camera I wore, but I don't have the head mount here in front of me, and this mess on my desk.
But then someone complained about it, so you. Method with the two cameras, one facing you and one over your shoulder somehow.
Yeah, I put it
between your legs
on a light stand that I have. Up there, because when I started doing comic book videos, it was really just an excuse to play with video, something that I wanted to learn all these processes for work. And the one thing that I thought, I knew something about or might have a perspective on was comic books. And then at one point I wrote an article for the Sunday paper because I worked with the newspaper all about, comic books and why I was interested in them. And then for a little while it was a thing, but I kind of got burned out on it. But now that I'm stuck at
article drive people to your channel or
a little bit. Yeah. It's not a huge thing. And then I just, the
and you're doing videos for your comic book store promoting the latest.
I was Casablanca Comics in Portland, Maine. Go there. They are awesome. Or go to their website and buy the stuff Rick has. I'm a little jealous. He gets to spend his days playing with comic books all the time. They are super nice. And if you are ever in Portland, Maine, drop by Casablanca Comics. Tell them you watch Chad's Attic, and you won't get anything for it, but they'll say, "Oh yeah." You can have a nice conversation.
Hey, Tim Howler Mouse is here. So even deeper into the good people from YouTube.
So the thing we were talking about,
just a random chat we're going to do.
Yeah, we're just shooting the breeze. You were showing me your Steranko book.
Yes.
And we were talking about why you that you did your video on.
Yes, and it's my current favorite comic book item.
Well, my current favorite comic book adjacent item is this one that I picked up at Casablanca last week. It's what is it? The Fantastic Paintings of Frazetta. Now I have a bunch of Frazetta books. So
for a second I thought you were going to say a bunch of Frazetta original paintings.
Yeah, no. No, you're talking to the wrong guy.
Selling those and buying a new house.
I would. Frazetta's art is amazing, but I think part of the reason I love Frazetta is when I was a teenager, they did an article in American Artists magazine. American Artists magazine came to my house because my mother was a painter. In fact, that if I move over, you can't even see it because it's so dark, but the painting on the wall behind me was painted by my mother. And so she got American Artists magazine, and she saw this Frazetta stuff, and she said, "Hey, this looks like something you would like." And I don't know, I was probably 13, 14, 15, something like that. For one thing, there was lots of pictures of attractive women. Which at that age was compelling. Yes. But it was so vivid. And then she bought me that first Valentine paperback of Frazetta's artwork. He had that
they did a couple volumes, right?
Yeah.
Paperback
they were amazing. And I think that was really kind of a stepping stone towards my fandom. I still have the original one someplace in a box upstairs. It's in terrible condition, but I cherish it. And every time I see a new Frazetta piece, I go crazy for it.
Yeah. Tim mentions a Frazetta painting selling for over $1 million. And I think it went up to I think then another one sold for like 1.5 million. I might be pulling that out of my
There was some information about sales in these, and yeah, they're crazy.
He is now, way up there. It reminds me of how my father, because my father used to make fun of Frazetta and Edgar Rice Burroughs and my comic books, of course.
All my favorite things.
And my Deep Purple albums. But near the end of his life, he said, "You know what? You won." The stuff you liked became what is like leading the culture.
Yeah. Well,
he didn't say that was a good thing, but he did say I won.
and it kind of ties in with something that interests me is how you attach to comics or whatever you attach to, and how your perspective on it is so dependent on what was going on, what the thing you attach to is.
Right.
So, when I listen to your podcast, which I listen to all the time, Never Stay Dead, is it?
Never Stay Dead, yes.
Yeah.
With Matt.
And it's really interesting to me, the sort of generational perspectives that you guys bring, because, he's really into that 90s stuff. And the 90s stuff it happened at the time when my life was just changing a lot. I had children suddenly, I couldn't be spending a lot of money on comic books and a lot of demands for my attention. And also I'd attached to comics around the time I left college. So the things that I was enjoying were Len Wein and Dave Gibbons' Green Lantern. I really, really like that. And then, Brian Bolland doing Camelot 3000. I'm sure I could list a whole thing. It was a great time to be in comics, the early 80s. But then the 90s came and the styles changed and I became a cranky old man.
Yeah. Well, but did you read Sandman or anything like that?
Absolutely.
Read stuff in the 90s. It just wasn't the same superhero stuff, at least from our geezer point of view. I now know a lot of people, through YouTube, and some of them live here in Portland, who started reading probably when they were 11, somewhere in the 90s, with Todd McFarlane blowing their mind. But I was too old, to have my mind blown just by great art at that point. It had to be something more.
Right. And I was kind of old when I really became a real comic book fan. I mean, I was sort of dabbling around, read a lot of science fiction novels, saw, Tron and Blade Runner and Star Wars and all of that stuff laid a foundation. And then when I got out of college, it's like, it was Savage Sword of Conan. I just had a really good experience reading some of those. And suddenly I discovered direct sales comic shops and back issues, and my poor wife met me just before that happened, so it's probably
she got the whole package of Comic Geek Chad. Maybe if she'd met you a year before, she could have saved you.
Yeah, maybe a year after, she could have ignored me. So
I want to say hi to Sam of Sam's Tangled Web. Hopefully, it's not too smoky at your house, Sam. Sam lives in Portland.
Oh, nice.
I saw in one of your videos you mentioning reading war comics when you were younger.
So war comics were like something I would pick up off the newsstand, or if you would be at a neighbor's house and they'd have a stack of ratty old comics. There's a period when you're a youngster where you just consume. At least I did. I was a reader, hardcore reader. I read all the Horatio Hornblowers, and even before that, I read like every Hardy Boys book that had been published to that point.
Wow, I actually skipped those.
Well, I'm a little...
But I know you read some of the same kind of science fiction fantasy I did.
Oh, Burroughs, a Princess of Mars.
Burroughs, right.
I read all the Mars, all the Carson of Venus. What else was there? A little bit of the Pellucidar. I didn't read very much Tarzan.
The Frazetta poster I had up on my wall when I was a teenager, or young preteen probably, was... from one of those Pellucidar books, or however you pronounce it. It was, I think, To the Earth's Core or something, and it was a picture of a man fighting a mastodon.
Oh, right. Is that the guy flying through the air with the spear in his hand?
I guess so. I think you see him from behind, like
or is he hunkered
and
down with the
coming
spear in his
at
hand.
the mastodon with the spear in
Yeah.
his hand. The mastodon's coming out. Anyway, I just wonder how much Frazetta has to do with why I got so hooked on that kind of fiction.
That particular image was in the American Artist magazine that we were talking about earlier. That and the one where you've got the big guy who looks like a Norse god and the polar bears pulling the chariot.
Oh yeah, which I first saw in a Michael Moorcock novel, and I don't know if that's where it originally came from. Maybe it did. Called the Silver something, Silver Warriors, Silver something.
I never read
Silver.
Michael Moorcock, except I really enjoyed the P. Craig Russell adaptations of Elric.
I read the Elric novels before any comic book versions.
And I tried to read one of those, and I don't know why I never got further into it.
I tried rereading them, and the writing was not as good as I thought it was going to be.
Now, did you read the Zelazny Amber stuff?
Yes, and those reread very nicely. I reread them as an adult.
Yeah, I kind of read those as an adult too, and really enjoyed them too. It was it's a little strange, but
and when you say that, I can picture the cover painting of the first Zelazny novel I read, which was The Guns of Avalon. It wasn't the first book in the series, but I can picture it was a painting by Ken Barr. So I think for me, the visuals of all of that always tied in with reading. And
I definitely have some of those Lancer paperback Burroughs books with Frazetta covers.
Yeah.
But that generational thing. So, around the time Todd McFarlane, and it was clear to me that Todd McFarlane was a really amazing artist, but his style wasn't necessarily something that was, but then you had Rob Liefeld. And so I reacted poorly to his art at first and actually never was won over. But what I tried to do is not judge, because I know that there are a bajillion people who attached to comics at that time who really, really, really enjoy his artwork. And it's like, so you can't really, but I pretty much have every comic book I ever bought except for Rob Liefeld's New Mutants, which I traded.
Oh, wow. I think I completely missed Rob Liefeld at the time. I remember I bought an X-Men or two with Jim Lee's art, and when I picked it up, I thought it was cool, but by the time I read the issue, I just wasn't interested.
And Jim Lee's another one. I like his artwork. It was visually arresting, but I don't like it as much as people who like your Matt in your podcast. He is such a fan, and so you just kind of have to respect that. And just try not to take away from somebody else's enjoyment, I think.
Although, to be fair to Matt, I think the stuff that he really connects with is things like Spider-Man from the early 2000s and that sort of era more, because he literally would have been about, I'm not sure how old he would have been in 2000, but probably 12.
I love it when you guys.
The first thing he did buy was Jim Lee X-Men, but it was already an old comic when he bought it.
Oh, okay. So Spider-Man in the early 2000s, is that when Carnage was starting to happen?
I don't even know. I don't know what was happening then, because I stopped reading Spider-Man in the 80s, except for one or two McFarlane issues.
And Spider-Man was never one of the characters that resonated strongly with me. I started really Green Lantern, and of course Batman is kind of universal. He's like the color blue of comics. And Captain America, I think that was something that I've got Cap right here. That was something that dated back to reading comics as a child and looking at
interested Kirby. You last when you came, because you are an unusual. So you did read some comics as a kid, but somehow did not fixate on them till you were 19 or 20, or
probably even older. Probably it was more like 22.
Right.
And so I came in.
So that goes against the golden ages 12 kind of true.
But at the same time, I was being set up for genre by all the science fiction and all the reading and the Frazetta art and that sort of thing. So, and then of course I don't do anything halfway.
And it was a good time to start reading comics. Comics had gotten really good because we're both the same age. And so I know that by 1980 or so, comics in 81, 82 really started ramping up and getting good.
George Perez, Teen Titans, the Omega Men was just coming out, the Keith Giffen version, the originals. I still have all of those.
Epic. Gore Vidal mentioned Epic magazine, the Epic line of comics, and both DC and Marvel were doing experiments with the direct market.
Yeah,
was there a particular comic shop? Because you were probably in Orono, Maine at that point.
The first one, I lived on the coast of Maine in a pretty rural town. I went to college in Orono. Yeah. The place where I first encountered it was in Norway. I was there for during a vacation. I was kind of doing an audition for a job that I never actually got.
I assume you're talking about some place called Norway, Maine.
Yeah.
Okay. At first, I thought you meant Norway.
Norway, Maine, and Oxford County. It's a lovely small town in the foothills of the White Mountains, I guess. But it's definitely inland. And then, so we started going to Portland, and we started going to Moonshadow Comics, which is no longer there, no longer exists. But I still know the people who ran it, and one of them actually works at Casablanca in Portland.
So it mostly was after college for you.
Yeah, almost all.
Wow.
The last, couple semesters in college, I was making road trips to Pendragon Comics in Lewiston, Maine, that disappeared years ago, and Moonshadow in Portland.
Bangor didn't have one yet.
Bangor did not have a comic shop. There wasn't a comic shop closer to Orono than Lewiston, and making weekend road trips with my buddy Mike Perry to conventions in Boston. I graduated from college, had a car for the first time, at a job at a radio station in Ellsworth, and yeah, we would make the 6-hour trek. I remember one time working like all day and then driving to Boston and just being so exhausted. I just dragged my butt to a Boston show and saw Marv Wolfman and George Perez, which was definitely a highlight. I every now and then I run across a George Perez autograph in the old school style in the inside front page of a comic book.
I like that better.
I still ask people to sign that way sometimes.
Bob, another Portland guy from Everything Comics, has joined us. Hey, Bob. We're just having, for people who joined recently, we're just having a random chat about comics. For those who don't know, Chad has a channel that he infrequently does videos on, and he lives in Portland, Maine. And I used to go every summer not to Portland, Maine, but to Maine. So we've met up in person a few times, and it's nice to chat in person again.
Long philosophical conversations about various things.
Chad knows where every little place that might be selling comics is in that part of Maine.
Yeah, we've done that a couple of times. Just kind of like, okay, there's here's an antique mall with a couple of stalls with some things, which is fun. And it's one of the things I miss the most about quarantining for the most part.
Right. Are those antique malls all going to go out of business, or have they gone out of business? I guess they'll just come back afterwards.
Yeah, and maybe they'll have new stuff.
Other people will start them up.
And
I assume those are low margin kind of places.
Well, they a lot of them are sort of they rent a booth to an individual,
right?
And so you've got a lot of different people doing business out of them. Another great joy of mine is just the day trip to New Hampshire. Jetpack Comics in Rochester has this back room filled with dollar bins.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I've had so much fun there. And also a Stairway to Heaven in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Those are both fine stores as well. If you happen to be traveling in the Northeast.
Quite a bit in your hunt.
I do. It's and sometimes it's just an excuse to get in the car and go. My kids are all grown up. They've moved out of the house. They all have their own thing going on. So My wife is here all the time, but she doesn't need.
She doesn't need to see you every hour.
We've been married for over 30 years. She doesn't need me every day.
Although now she's probably getting you every hour of the day.
she is, except when she's working. So a Saturday, and sometimes she will come too if I'm going someplace interesting, right. and hang out in the car because we usually stop at a restaurant, and she's big into photography, so we go places and she can shoot some different stuff.
Well, so even though you started in the mid 80s, you've obviously taken interest in at least some comics from well before then. I know we were talking about Conan, and I feel like in going through the boxes, you've shown older comics.
Yeah, I've acquired some back issues over the years. I mean, my original sort of quest was to fill up as much of a run of the Silver Age Green Lantern as I could. There's still holes in it, because some of those issues are insanely expensive, and I wasn't really thinking so much about the grade. I was just thinking about being a completist, so a lot of them are crunchy. In fact, we were talking about on my video the other day about the new Green Lantern series and how they referenced a character who was introduced in number 71, and I pulled it out, and it was pretty chewed up.
But it's nice to know that reference. Most people don't. I don't think I caught it.
I think I had to look it up. I definitely remembered his career as a toy salesman.
See, I did not know.
And his career as a truck driver. I have a piece of original art of him driving the truck with the power battery on the seat next to it.
So when was he a truck driver? Before the Neil Adams run, or
this was after. This was 107.
You kind of have a sense of the writers just don't know what to do with him or something when you're suddenly becoming a toy salesman.
Well, I don't know. Well, I mean, it seems like Grant Morrison. That's right. Grant Morrison's writing it now, right?
Yes.
He just goes through and finds the absurdities in these old issues and says, "What can I do with that?" And it's interesting to me. I really enjoyed the Jeff Johns run while it was happening. Mm-hmm. But it seemed like it was accreting a lot of lore, like of a lot of new lore, and it was kind of, for me as a kind of an old school guy, it seemed like a lot. But there's some potential there, but Grant Morrison seems to be kind of ignoring a lot of that. So some of the as somebody who grew up in a fishing town, it was felt like barnacles on the hull of the.
Yeah. So have you been keeping up with his season 2? Because I've been collecting them and haven't been reading them yet.
I'm a few issues behind. I think I've read the first 4. There was one in particular, and I talked about this on the last time I did a video, which was 3 weeks ago. That Liam Sharp art is amazing. I mean, and this is a guy, and it seems like they started with the intent of being influenced by 90s comics in terms of the proportions of the heroes,
right?
And some of the presentations,
over embellishment of things.
But the part of his artwork I really like is his designs of like monsters and aliens, because they're wildly imaginative.
Yes. They seem more like something out of British comics, out of 2000 AD and that.
I love British comics. Brian Bolland, when I was starting, was drawing Judge Dredd infrequently, and then it went mostly to Mike McMahon. And it's just enough off center so that it's fresh in your, because it's drawing on cultural references outside of what I was used to at the time. But that happened with Alan Moore. I think it happened with Neil Gaiman as well.
Right. Yeah, but we haven't seen as many of that Liam Sharp art seems fresh because we haven't seen as many of the kind of wild drawing styles from 2000 AD come over to the US as much as the writers did. I mean, some of the artists came over, but I feel like they were more toned down or something.
Yeah, I mean, I liked a lot of those guys. Ian Gibson, Dave Gibbons.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Whatever happened to Ian Gibson?
I don't know.
I mean, he did that Miracle Man run, and then I don't think
I didn't even know he was on Miracle Man.
Huh. That was way back. And they're really good. But maybe he just started doing more Brit stuff, or I think a lot of these guys work in comics, but I feel like if you're not in the top tier in comics, it's a hard job.
I think so. And you're probably always wondering if you're going to get your next another paycheck or not.
Yeah, for lesser rewards than you might get using your art skills for advertising or for movies or for other things that you can use those skills for.
Well, and I guess that's what Steranko did. Why Steranko left comics. He was off in Hollywood doing storyboards and such.
Yeah, I mean, Dave Stevens is one of my absolute favorite artists, but he didn't do many comics. He just did a lot of production art in Hollywood, and that guy is amazing. I think there's a lot of that happens.
Yeah, well, it's sad for us, but I guess good for them when they go off to Hollywood.
Yeah,
I in fact have these books I haven't read yet that I bought somewhere half off. This one's All-Star Future Shocks with Neil Gaiman, Grant Morrison, Alan Grant, Mark Millar, Peter Milligan. But the art I was looking at. So these are those shorts that beginning writers at 2000 AD had to do. So
I'm sure some of those are awesome. I have
the art can be sort of amateurish looking, actually.
Someplace upstairs, I have an old Titan book reprint of 2000 AD stuff called Alan Moore's Shocking Futures. I think this probably has.
So that's these same things, I think, but by Alan Moore, and these are by the other authors who are now well known who did them. But yeah, that kind of reminds that Liam Sharp art has that extra scratchiness and I don't know quality to it that seems not seen in American art too often.
I really, the new Green Lanterns are a stand. It's one of the things that I'm buying. It seems like there's not that much stuff that I'm buying these days. Have you been buying reading the Donny Cates Thor?
I have, but I had some delays in getting certain issues, and so I have many issues to catch up on. So I think I only read the first 2 issues, or maybe the first 3, as he's working as the Herald of Galactus.
Those have been really good.
Yeah. Bob says both Neil Adams and Steranko have said many times there were points where they could make a lot more money. I'm always forgetting I can do this.
Yeah.
Where they could make a lot more money in other industries than they could in comics. And,
Neil Adams definitely.
And Neil Adams did make a lot of money outside of comics, but he kept coming back at least. Although now it's less exciting when he comes back, sadly. I'm reading his current Fantastic Four, and it's troubling to look at. Especially the way he draws Ben Grimm, the Thing.
Neil Adams drawing the Thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a couple of
like a guy in a plastic monkey suit, but
I have a couple of his X-Men issues. How did that time out with Green Lantern? Was that around the same time?
Green Lantern actually came after the X-Men. I had thought it was before, but then I looked it up. So that was interesting. So it looks like Ian Gibson Howler Mouse has seen his work still around. He's in his 70s. I don't even know about the Den of Geek website.
Ballad of Halo Jones. If you haven't read that one, that's worthwhile. It's Alan Moore and Ian Gibson. Hello
to Chris from Chaos and Comics. Peter Milligan's often forgotten when we think of great bit. Yeah, and Peter Milligan's still around writing stuff. What did I see him doing recently? But I've read a bunch of shorter series by him lately. Mr. Gretzky is here. Hey. Gore Vidal says Peter Milligan wrote some Elektra in the early 90s.
Is that early 90s? No, that's not quite Marvel Knights yet, is it?
Yeah, that would be the late 90s, I think, the Marvel Knights.
Okay.
But I think Milligan was in on from Marvel Knights.
What did I read
here, all the way from England? Hey.
What did I read something the other day. I think it was on Marvel from 2008. It might have been associated with Secret Invasion. And it's really funny to me how different things are even now from 2008. I think, Marvel's was at that point, I think, in the depths of its bankruptcy problems, or maybe just coming out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was super gruesome. And I was like, I don't think you would see this in a Marvel comic today.
Yeah.
I was surprised, the severed limbs and such.
Do you remember which one that was? Sorry,
I'm thinking it was like a
and was it the Max line?
No, I think it was like a Bendis Avengers book or something. Or it might have been Secret Invasion, because I just did reread that. Actually, I read that.
Maybe now that Disney owns them, they wouldn't do that kind of thing.
Well, I think it depends on what the title is. I think they would do it in some things, but I don't think they would do it in Avengers necessarily.
I mean, there are rumors the new owners of DC want to roll back the adultness of comics quite a bit.
And I don't think that's necessarily a problem, going back to our conversation about when people attach to comics, because if your comics sales are tailing off, then grabbing a new generation of young people to create an association with a new generation of comics. I think you've got some of that going on with Kamala Khan and Riri Williams and even the Spider-Man, the new one.
Right. Miles Morales.
Yeah. Those things you can see that the collectors are really interested in that. And I think it's because partially for that reason that you've got a new generation of people attached to these characters. And I don't know if it was, I suspect it was probably strategic, but I don't know that for a fact.
Well, and I have run across some fellow parents, since I have a 12-year-old, who mention the violence in comics as they stay away from comic book stores. And there was a point, I think when my daughter was maybe 5 or 6 or 7, we went into the comic book store and there was a cover at her eye level for an Image comic called Spread, which had a guy's guts coming out of his body. And she didn't go back to the comic book store for 2 years after that.
Do you remember a comic called Void Indigo?
I remember that name, but
it was art by Val Myrick, and it was over the top violent. It lasted like 3 issues, and the outcry was so bad it was gone right away.
But my opinion is the overtopness should not be on the covers, because the covers are kind of part of the public environment of a comic book store.
Maybe. I mean, there was a period with even Green Lantern Corps, and I think that was probably mid 2000s, where I started around the time I think maybe Jeff Johns was doing Green Lantern, or maybe just, and it just seemed it was particularly gruesome. It was a lot of flying chunks of creatures, and it kind of turned me off of the book because, I don't know, my taste.
Yeah. Well, and apparently when New 52 started, they had a specific dictate to make it gory.
Really?
They thought that was helping sales, I guess.
Well, again, if that's the fashion when you attach, then maybe that's what you
and maybe it's the whole aesthetic of horror movies has moved into the mainstream of entertainment in general.
Faust by Tim Vigil. I'm not familiar with that one.
I haven't seen that one either. Huh.
Early. Now, did you have a gap? Was there a period where you were deeply into comics and then it kind of went away, became a secondary thing, or you just stopped?
Well, I had several gaps, but the most purposeful one was when I was 16. I said, girls are not going to like me. I need to spend my money on cars or gasoline for the car I borrowed from my parents. And I sold all my comics, or I thought I'd sold all my comics. I don't know if you saw a video I did recently where my mom sent me a box of comics I did not know I still had. I
saw some where I thought your roommate sent it to you, or it's one of.
And then there's a friend from high school who then we were also housemates for a while in Somerville, Massachusetts. He sent me a bunch of comics, some of which were mine, some were his. But then more recently, my mom, who just sold her house, sent me a box she found in the attic.
Oh, I gotta find that, because I saw those boxes from your roommate and I was like, wow. The stuff that you pulled out of there was kind of amazing.
My roommate had, or my housemate, my high school friend Bruce had bought a lot of. Well, he had a lot of Spider-Man from his youth, but then he bought even more back in 1990 or so when they were still quite cheap. So there was some impressive stuff in there.
That is one thing when I think about when I started buying comics and I was focused on buying back issues of Green Lantern back in, 84, 85, 86, I really should have been buying Batman because I could have definitely done better than you can do today on those early 80s, late 70s issues even, but going back to the 50s and 60s.
Well, Gore Vidal mentions Crossed, which I read when the brief time when Alan Moore wrote 6 issues, but otherwise haven't. I think Gore, even though these don't cause public controversy, they are kind of causing a steady trickle of parents bringing their kids into comic book stores and deciding, no, we're not going back. And that's never made public. Those people don't make videos and say, hey, I went to a comic book store one time and now I'm not going to go back. But
interesting.
I don't see. It seems like maybe it's because I've changed shops. I don't see Avatar comics all over the place anymore. But those are all of Avatar comics are disturbing. Purposeful.
So changing the subject a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you have an opinion about the impact of speculation on comic book fandom? Because that was the thing that it felt like to me that really kind of soured me on comics in like the mid to late 90s.
Right.
And I see it happening a little bit again. There are some popular YouTube channels and I enjoy watching them. There's this guy, Comic Tom 101. I think he's in your area.
I think he lives in Washington State and he's pretty good friends with Bueller, who I know pretty well, but I actually don't. I've only watched a few Comic Tom because I'm just not interested in that stuff.
I think they do
the hottest comics of the week for speculation.
I love it. I love watching it, but I'm just wondering if it's I'm just wondering, because he's got an amazing following, but I just wonder.
So how many of the following of these video channels are actually speculators or just find it fun, like a horse race kind of thing to see what's hot right now?
Well, if you enjoy digging dollar bins, which I love, it's kind of helpful to see those things to know what's top of mind. And, I saw this the other week, but then again, I've never been someone who bought and sold comics and I've never been interested in that. And I don't necessarily look down on people who do, because I think if you enjoy something the way you enjoy it, that's cool. But I do have a little bit of a memory going back to the late 90s.
Bye, Bob.
Of that being something, Wizard magazine. But there again, you've got those people who attach that period in their life who that was the thing that got them enthused about comics.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Well, and there's an effect, say, at least for back when I was a kid, you're reading comics. No one respects you for reading them, especially the adults. And then they read an article. Oh, this comic sold for $100, which was a big deal back then. And they say, oh, you're buying something that could be valuable. And suddenly it raises you up a little bit in status.
I guess.
And I wonder if people are enjoying their comics more by imagining or in reality having them be of some value, that gives an extra tangy enjoyment to their love of comics or something.
And when I find something that I every time I watch one of those things and something pops because, somebody's been rumored to be in a new movie, I have to go to the CLZ Comics app and see, because I think I might have that issue. I'm never going to do anything with it. It's just going to sit in the collection. So there's that little twinge of pleasure that I get from it. And it is, it's sharing enthusiasm for these things.
Those videos about, what are the hot spec comics right now strike me as being about it's like small penny ante gamblers. The real gamblers or the people really making money are buying the right Silver Age comics that are going up and knowing that, and those people are making over a period of years, tens of thousands of dollars, perhaps. Or maybe.
Now, do you own a single slab?
No.
me neither. So that's the kind of collector we are. We're just different kind of collectors than the people who do, I guess.
I could see if I suddenly decided I want to use my quote knowledge of comics to make some money, then I would want to buy slab comics, but I wouldn't slab modern comics. I would be looking at, Silver or even Golden Age comics to slab.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally understandable why people do it, because if you're working in a situation where you're buying on eBay and you can't pick up the comic and touch it and look at it closely and decide, is it worth X dollars? But at the same time, for me, the pleasure has always been in reading the comics. And so when you slab it, you turn it from a piece of art that you can consume into an object that's purpose is completely different.
Yeah, I always think of it as being like a stamp collection then.
Yeah.
It's just this thing you can look at and know that you have the rare one.
And it's a similar thing with it completely defies me why anybody thinks that there's a market difference in value between a comic that has Spider-Man in the UPC box versus a UPC symbol in the UPC box.
Right.
I don't get it.
Well, I think there's a pleasure in collecting. And so these people, I shouldn't say these people because I could sometimes be like that. People are looking for distinguishing things to make collecting more interesting. Like the Mark Jeweler, have you heard of this? The Mark Jeweler inserts. That makes some comics more valuable. And then the 35-cent price variance when Marvel was trying a higher price in certain parts of the country.
Again, it's and I never want to be the guy who's sitting there saying you're doing comics wrong. You're enjoying comics wrong. Right. Because that's just not the way to do it. You're just doing comics differently than I am.
Yeah. But I think those things are kind of fun. I don't personally look for Mark Jeweler comics or whatever.
No, I would never.
But I find that fun to collect if you're not paying a lot of extra money for it. It might be say, hey, cool, I've got 2 versions of this comic that cost me $2 and one has this thing in it and one doesn't.
It's this fascinating hobby. So I wonder if under the new regime at DC Comics, they're going to be getting away from the variant cover, producing things for the collectibles market versus the actually trying to create artwork for people to purchase and consume.
The downside of the variant covers is when they use it to artificially jack up the numbers of books that bookstores buy, that comic book stores buy. I don't know if the people at Casablanca have ever mentioned that to you, where they have to buy 25 copies of a comic to get the variant.
I can't speak for Rick, but I don't think he does a ton of that. I think he takes it when it's available. But I don't think it's I think running a comic book store is a very, very, very hard job. Back when I was in my 20s and 30s,
pretty thankless.
There were times when I thought, well, that would be fun. And like I said earlier, I am jealous of Rick's ability to make a living playing with comics all the time. But anybody who's been able to keep a comic shop open for that long has immense respect for me, however they did it. Because that's just a hard.
So you've known him a long time. Do you have the sense that he makes, the living of an elementary school teacher or something?
I think, I mean, I don't want to speculate because
you don't really know. Yeah, I shouldn't even go there.
I would say that Casablanca is a very successful store. And it's the kind of store where you can take your child or your wife and just, be completely comfortable, which is, and I think that's a very deliberate thing. There are other stores that I go to sometimes where that may not necessarily be the case, but it's part of the reason that I choose to make that the store that I do the most business with.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a Casablanca Comics, Portland, Maine. Call them up. Tell them Chad sent you.
So just a little more on the speculative thing. I do worry about people coming into comics and they see so many of these videos and they think, I won't be a real comic book collector unless I become concerned with the hot books and the speculative books and stuff like that. As long as people realize this is just one way to collect comics and one way to enjoy comics, not the most sanctioned, important way to collect comics.
Well, we could buy them copies of X-Force #1 in the polybag.
I've seen hints of people who maybe think that. So anyway,
if that's what makes you happy, I dig into the history and the artists and the personalities behind it, and really, that's always been, the knowledge piece of it that has been
right. I do have my ways not to waste money, so I don't put anyone down. So have I told you about that I've taken up collecting original art?
Yeah, I've seen it in your videos, and I know you've got some good stuff. I've got like 3 pieces of pretty low rent original art.
Right. And I've been buying what to me seems pretty expensive stuff, and I don't know if it will ever even pay for itself. Like if I want to sell it, because I bought it from Heritage Auctions, and they charge an extra 20% to you, the purchaser. And apparently they also are charging something to the seller, maybe 10%. So everything I'm buying is already at least 30%. I'm paying 30% more than I could actually get back for it, if assuming it holds its value. So at first I was thinking, oh yeah, I could always sell this stuff and I won't be hurting my heirs or anything like that.
Yeah. I don't know. I enjoy, because sometimes when you're at a show, you find this booth on the corner where the person has just portfolios and portfolios of old original art. And
I've heard that doesn't happen anymore.
Really?
I'll have to look around and see.
I mean, it seems like a couple years ago in Boston, I saw it, and you're looking through and you're looking at Kirby and you're looking at just, Buscema and old Marvel stuff. And you're like, this is beautiful, but I don't, Mike Kaluta. And I don't even want to ask what it's cost because I know I'm not going to buy it and I don't want to waste your time.
Right. Well, I'm seeing covers like Kirby covers and John Romita covers going in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's just like, who has that much money to spend on one collectible? I'm just surprised there's so many people out there who can do that.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, say you have $1 million to spend, you want to spend 1/10 of that on one piece of paper.
The price value thing, but people are different. That's what makes the world wonderful, right?
Yeah. I'm not. I have seen stuff about the fine art world that there's these like Russian, what do you call them? Like conglomerates of people with money in Russia who put their money together to buy fine art as a way to perhaps avoid taxes and other things. I don't know if comic book art's been hit by that. Excuse me. Did you ever get into DC? I just got this book. I just pulled the wrapper off of it.
What is it?
It's called Choke Gasp, a selection of hand-picked EC comic stories.
Oh, I'll tell you. Here, I'll go get some EC comics.
Oh, you have some real EC comics. So I'll just show you guys some images while I wait for Chad to come back. I just literally took the paper off of this. It looks like it's mostly the horror. I've mostly been, there's some of the sci-fi. I like the sci-fi best from Image. Those both back up.
This is what I traded my Rob Liefeld New Mutants for.
Oh, nice.
This and the Two-Fisted Tales, the set. These Kurtzman War books.
Wow.
They're classics and they're so good.
And Kurtzman is so often mentioned as a big influence on all the best artists, including Steranko. But I have not looked closely at his artwork other than sometimes in Mad Magazine.
Well, see, he was an editor of these books. So he didn't always draw them.
Is he the one who wrote all the scripts along with Bill Gaines?
Yeah, and he wrote them in breakdowns. So he would sketch out the scripts, and then other people would do the finished drawings.
So it is him in a sense. The pacing, the paneling is his decisions then.
Right. Have you ever seen that poster, 22 panels that always work?
Yeah, but that's Wally Wood, right?
Oh, is it? That's Wally Wood. Okay, yeah. Um, I'm sure there's a lot of creators have that on their wall. It's like, what do I do here now?
Yeah, I think the point of that was interesting things to do when your writer has given you a boring scene. Like, how do I make this conversation interesting? Do it over the shoulder, make the shadows this way, do that, all that kind of stuff.
So, changing topics again, because when I came into comics, I found the DC comics more interesting because we were deep in the shooter era.
Yes. And things had kind of dried up at Marvel at that point.
Yeah, and the Marvels just were, I don't know, he didn't like establishing shots or close-ups or something. It was also vanilla at the time.
Yeah.
Except that you had Simonson doing Thor and John Byrne doing Fantastic Four. Mike Zeck was drawing Captain America, which was amazing.
Yeah. So there was still good stuff there. But, but it seemed that was the very early 80s. And then it seemed to really kind of dry up by the mid 80s, if I'm remembering correctly. But I think that's why the people who eventually became the Image artists made such a big splash, because after that very vanilla approach to art for a while, they came along and were at the total other end of the spectrum.
Right. And over at DC, you had Karen Berger doing kind of new things and the British invasion happening. Milton Caniff is a huge fan of, I'm a huge fan of Milton Caniff.
He's a huge fan of yours.
Yeah, no, well, the best Milton Caniff is pre-war Terry and the Pirates. Maybe not the first year, but because Terry and the Pirates started in the early 30s, but you know, the 37, 38, 39 up to like 42.
And there are beautiful, I forget which publisher, there are beautiful hardbacks of those. And I bought a few and got a few out of the library because of the channel not Gore Vidal, sorry, that's Gore Vidal asking, because of the channel Earl Grey. So Gore, I would go look through Earl Grey's videos and look for his Terry and the Pirate, whatchamacallit, his videos. And because of that, I collected but haven't really read through any of them yet. I found a bunch of, what was that publisher's name? The publisher also did the Spirit, not Last Gasp. Anyway, they published Kitchen Sink published a magazine of Milton Caniff's Steve Canyon. So that's out there and not too expensive, I think.
I have all of them. One of the things that I used to buy, I used to travel all over to find, were these NBM collections, which were the best Terry collections at the time.
Oh, okay.
The Flying Buttress Library.
Nice. I didn't know about those.
Yeah, I don't have a complete set. I don't have the first couple. So if anybody ever finds volume 1 of this available,
I'd have to go halfway across the house to find my Milton Caniff volumes, but I can't remember if Fantagraphics is publishing them or IDW or someone like that.
Yeah, they've been
very nice volumes.
A couple of different ways, but these were good. Some of them were shot from newsprint, but where he could, he got the original art and did them.
I think I originally saw Terry and the Pirates reprinted in like some magazine that would just reprint old comic strips,
like Comics Review or something.
Maybe it was Comics Review. There was also a Menominee something Gazette.
Oh yeah, Menominee Falls Gazette.
Right, and so I got some of those magazines, and I would get snippets of Terry and the Pirates and other classics.
I was a huge fan of before I was even into comic books. I was a huge fan of Cy Berry's Phantom. That was in the Bangor Daily News.
Yes, I remember reading the Phantom in the newspapers too.
Yeah, the Kit Walker, the Ghost Who Walks.
Yeah, when I was a kid, there was still the Phantom, and there was still Prince Valiant.
Right.
I don't think it was drawn by Hal Foster anymore, but and now I've discovered Fantagraphics has these beautiful Hal Foster Prince Valiant volumes. So I have the first 3 volumes of that I got in a box set.
I think they've done a couple. They've gone around a couple of times because I have some oversized Prince Valiant reprints that I
had one as a kid that fell apart entirely when I read it so many times. But the Fantagraphics one is if you don't already have something of it, they're beautiful. It's a great thing to ask for Christmas or something.
It's so how do you feel about the the cultural differences, because sometimes in those things, you see things and you're like, ooh, that wouldn't happen today.
Yeah.
Either something racial or just just some out of date attitudes.
Well, I've only so far read the first volume of Prince Valiant, and it's interesting because when he and his family flee, I think they're fleeing from Denmark or something like that. They flee and they land somewhere in England, and they're kind of like colonists arriving in the United States and wanting to take some land.
Well, there's one scene in
fight with a bunch of the natives who are just Brits, but
there's one scene in one of those Fantagraphic Prince Valiant reprints that just sticks with me, where some guy tried to like steal his food or like kill him while he was camping in the woods, and he just basically murders the guy.
Right. Oh, they kill people all the time in Prince Valiant. They just don't show it.
Yeah. So it's like I was like, what? This is the good guy, and he looks like such a milquetoast kind of dude.
Yeah, and they basically steal land from people and stuff like that. But I guess that's what the Middle Ages was really like.
Maybe culturally it was appropriate.
Just for the beautiful art, really, I suppose, that I love it.
Oh, the vistas are great. He's building his castle in a valley off in the distance.
You've got a master illustrator who spends an entire week drawing one page, and so you just end up with this incredible stuff.
Oh yeah, and he did Tarzan before that.
Yeah, and I would like to find some volumes of his Tarzan. Those don't seem to be currently easy to find.
I have one, or I think I have one that I snapped up when I saw it back probably in 1989 or something.
I used to have, I think his name is Brune Hogarth, the guy who came after. I used to have volumes of his as a kid drawing Tarzan.
Was he the one who did the anatomy anatomy textbooks?
Drawing anatomy textbooks, he did those, yeah.
I remember.
I still have not read Hugo Pratt's Corto Maltese. I guess that's considered a really major European comic, and I think looks, from what I've seen of the art, looks a lot like Terry and the Pirates.
It does. There's a couple. I have a couple of volumes upstairs in boxes, but it doesn't seem like it's been reprinted a lot here.
Yeah,
but it is that whole sort of chiaroscuro sort of black and white artwork.
Right.
It's very nice. Yeah.
And I guess the American Sunday comics artists had a lot of influence on Europe, even though the American comic book artists were not very influential there.
Yeah, I mean, but even the American comic strip artists, like Kniff, for example, I can see Kniff in Frank Robbins.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I had a nice conversation with Frank Robbins at a convention years ago about Kniff, and also Jim Aparo. Early Jim Aparo is very reminiscent of Milton Kniff.
Yeah, I really like early Jim Aparo, or like when he did work in mystery magazines before he got onto Batman. I thought that was very impressive.
I do think he's kind of an underrated artist.
Yeah. Oh, he is in general but part of it is he later in his career he cranked out so much and he simplified his style to do it. I think that watered him down a bit.
Yeah, I enjoyed his Batman, and then Batman and the Outsiders. That was kind of the Jim Aparo that I enjoyed. But going back though, he did like Phantom Stranger books.
Right, when he was at Charlton, I think.
Well, Phantom Stranger would have been DC, right?
Oh, Phantom Stranger, yes. Sorry, I was thinking of The Phantom, because I think he might have also done The Phantom.
Oh, maybe.
Maybe not. Maybe someone else. So Gore is mentioning, the very offensive depiction of Africans or African Americans. And I've been reading Asterix with my daughter, and that has very offensive depictions of Africans, with the ridiculous lips and other features. And that was written in the 60s and 70s, and it kind of blew my mind that they were still doing that in France then. And I know Tintin has a lot of problems with that too, although that's older work.
So how do you handle that with presenting this information to younger people? You can't?
Well, I was caught by surprise by the Asterix, and my daughter was like bug-eyed over that because she has had so much racial sensitivity training in school, so to speak. She couldn't believe that anyone would be allowed to do that, or that we would even be allowed to look at that page. It was a moment where we almost had to close the book, but then I tried to talk about why they might have thought that was okay back then. And
I guess, it does bring up, teaching moments. But maybe you need to know it's there going in and have that sort of information up front. This particular work features attitudes and depictions that today are inappropriate, but we don't want to hide them because we have to confront our past.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. And the weird thing is, I don't think Will Eisner at the time realized he probably thought he was not a racist while drawing those drawings. It's this weird kind of thing. And probably the people drawing Asterix did not think they were racist while drawing these drawings of African slaves in ancient Rome as kind of, I can't even think of a nice word for how to say it, but
yeah. I mean, this is not an area where I focus. So
yeah, I don't know what the answers to these things are.
But I do wonder how you confront these things when you're dealing with,
children,
current work. Yeah. Children and also, current reproductions of work of a previous era where the different things were happening.
Interestingly, someone has decided to do American translations of Asterix. And they've just started doing that because any Asterix you've read in the past was the British translation. And so this reprint of Asterix showing these unfortunately drawn Africans is brand new. So they decided to just go ahead and show it.
And is there any sort of prelude or warning that, we know that this is problematic but rather than discard this work?
Because Disney does that on their old cartoons, right? They have a little disclaimer now.
Yeah, but you never see Song of the South,
right?
Because that's so problematic. Yeah, it's a difficult issue.
Well, I agree with Tim that it is the people of color who should tell us what they think about it.
I think that's true too. Yeah.
But yeah, it's a tricky thing. I kind of wonder because a lot of awards in science fiction have been renamed because the people they were named after were considered questionable now, and I'm seeing grumblings about Will Eisner, and I wonder if they will remove Will Eisner's name from the Eisner Award at some point. There's a lot of there's a group of people who don't find just accepting the historical context and moving on.
Yeah, and maybe they're correct. It does make me wonder though, 50 years from now, what people will look at that we accept today.
Oh, true.
And say, well, that was wrongheaded.
Yes. There are still ways that we insult people, for instance, that could be viewed as very wrongheaded. I'm not going to go into it actually now that I think of my example of it.
Yeah, I feel like we should move to a less fraught topic.
It is your fault though. You brought it up.
Oh, sorry.
Then Gore took us to a higher level.
Yeah.
But well, I have recently fallen in love with Usagi Yojimbo now that he's in color, and I just saw this book, I guess, on sale, and it's just a whole bunch of other people besides Stan Sakai doing their take on Usagi. Have you ever read Usagi Yojimbo? Oh
yeah, I have all the first issues, all the early issues.
You're way cooler than me. I until it was in color, I never really read it.
I don't have the Albedo issues, but I did definitely have a Usagi Yojimbo #1.
And are you buying the current ones?
No.
Okay.
No.
Because I think the current new ones he's done for IDW are amazingly impressive comics. In fact, in my little countdown, they're often #1.
I'll have to pick that up and see what Stan Sakai is doing now. How old is he?
I don't know, but I've seen him at conventions a year or two ago, and he seems in very good shape and very sharp of mind. I would assume he's late 60s, but maybe not. I'm not even sure. I don't know.
And there was a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Usagi Yojimbo action figure back in the day.
Oh, was there?
I think, yeah, he made some like guest appearances on the cartoon show, and they made an action figure.
I'm sorry, I'm going through these. But we decided to move on from that conversation. But I did want to acknowledge those people for their well appreciated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess Usagi's been associated with the Turtles from early on, or maybe from the very beginning of Usagi's, because there was a recent crossover that they did.
Those guys are from Maine and New Hampshire.
Walt Simonson drawing Usagi.
I'm such a huge Walt Simonson fan. But he's,
do you buy his current?
Yes, Ragnarok.
Ragnarok.
Yeah.
I was buying it till they raised the price by $1, so it's like a $5 book or something.
Is it? It's in. I think
it's my latest free now or something.
My latest stack that I got from Casablanca here. We'll go through this thing and see if you're reading any of this stuff. All right, so this is what I picked up the last time I was at the comic shop, except for the Three Jokers, which is someplace else.
Okay.
And I don't know if you read Empire.
No, I'm avoiding most Marvel, and I'm avoiding Empire or any crossover. Is it good though?
I thought it was pretty good. I really like the is it the Valerio Schiti art? Forgive my pronunciation. I've never heard these people's names out loud, and so I can only presume.
One is tempted to pronounce his name Shitty.
Yes. Oh well, Batman. I am like 3 years behind on Batman, so they just pile up in my box.
My. I finally caught up on my Batman.
Yeah, so
I think the James Tynion run is quite good, except I'm so sick of the Joker.
I'm kind of sick of the Joker too, actually. Now this is one. They had recently had an anniversary issue of Green Lantern, and I just saw a page in there by an artist I'd never heard of before. It's Mirka Andolfo. Have you seen this? Mercy?
I've seen that comic, but I didn't know what it was. Is Mirka Andolfo someone I should know of?
I believe she's an Italian woman. I really, really like this artwork. It's sort of a gothic horror tale.
What number issue is that?
This is late in the series. This is number 5.
So it's probably one to either look for in the back issue bins or a trade.
Right. Mirka Andolfo's Mercy, and this is an artist. I don't know. This is somebody whose work I've.
So is Mirka Andolfo the artist or the writer?
The artist and writer.
This is nice art.
This particular case.
Okay.
I started Legion of Superhero is just something it's not something I buy regularly or have bought a lot of.
So did that come out this week?
Yeah, I mean last week is.
I had just taken it off my pull list. I just finally got sick of it.
So this is I put it on saying I'll go for a little while, and this like has a new artist every other page.
Oh right.
Yeah.
So have you read that issue?
I have not. I haven't read any of this.
Is that like the trial of this Legion or something?
Yeah.
I just found it unbearable to read. I kept wanting to like it.
How about Black Magic?
That I collect in trades. So I really like the art, and I can't remember what I thought of the story anymore. It's been a while since I read it.
I really like the art too. Definitely not something to show the child. Okay. The last issue was just, not something you would want to share with your child.
It's written by Greg Rucka, I know.
It is, yeah.
A lot of people love.
And that guy's pretty successful with all the stuff he's got on TV these days.
Oh yeah.
Amethyst, Princess of Gemworld.
I am getting that. My daughter reads it first, and then I read it.
I've always loved Amy Reeder's art. Well, I mean, I started reading it when she was doing Rocket Girl, which I think was an image book. But then I discovered she was drawing Matt Wagner Madame Xanadu series.
Right. I think that's where she first made her name. I've always wanted to take a look at that.
Yeah, I've got a pile of those back there from my to be read bin. I've been reading them. They're very nice. I just picked up this first issue of this Black Widow in part because of the Adam Hughes cover.
And was it good?
I have not read it yet. I haven't read anything in the stack. And and then Strange Adventures. So
I've been enjoying that. That most recent issue was not my favorite of the issues, but it's really all one long story. So it's judging the issue by one. Judging issue is not really fair.
I think I've only read the first 1 or 2 issues, and the rest are in my to be read box. Tom King as a creator is interesting because that Vision series hit me like a ton of bricks.
In a good way, you mean?
Yeah, it was amazing.
And I thought his Mr. Miracle was very good, although I was pissed off by the last issue.
Yeah, it was definitely something. He definitely is kind of stretching the genre, I think, a little bit. And then his Batman, the fake out with Catwoman, I felt a little betrayed by. But I haven't read the end of it either. But there were certain issues that
I did not like. Well, I stopped at issue 50 with that fake out. I felt like I'd been forcing myself to read it, and then when I got to that issue, I just stopped.
Although the Elmer Fudd issue, that might have been a special. That was an annual, wasn't it?
It was. There was a bunch of special crossovers with DC and Warner Brothers cartoons or Looney Tunes.
That was pretty amazing.
That was very good. Yeah.
And so this and did you read the Omega Man?
I did. It was very depressing.
It was, but
it was good. And I read his Grayson also, which I liked. But you have something special to say about Omega Man? It's vague in my memory now.
It's just, Kyle Rayner is a character I've frequently been down upon. And he sort of redeemed himself a little bit in that book by realizing how pathetic he is.
Everyone was kind of pathetic in that book.
I guess. Yeah. I remember reading the original Omega Men for far longer than I probably should have.
Yeah. So I guess Mirka has drawn other things, and Gore is aware of it. I've not heard of Unnatural either.
She did a handful of issues of Batgirl too.
Really?
Which I didn't notice at the time, but I'd read them. But that, like I said, that Green Lantern page popped out at me, and then I was like immediately called up my friends at the store and said, "Oh, here's this new series, this new Image series that just came out." I picked up the first 2 issues and I said, "Put this on my list."
Yeah. Usagi fans should keep an eye out for this free comic book day comic. So it's just become free comic summer, I guess, where they trickle these things out. But my shop had this and gave it to me. But Usagi travels to another universe where he meets the chibi version of himself. And I think this is all and it was a fun enough read, but I think this is all a teaser for a graphic novel that they're going to aim at kids. Where is it? Oh, come on. I could have sworn they showed the cover of it. Oh, no. They just have a page saying Chibi Usagi, Attack of the Heebie-Chibis, an original all-ages graphic novel by Julie Sakai and Stan Sakai. So anyway, this is kind of a fun thing if you can get it for free.
Nice.
Have you stumbled across Hydra?
I looked at it and I was like, I feel like this would consume about 90 seconds of my time for $6. And
I keep picking it up and looking it over again. So,
really?
It depends maybe on your taste and whether you like to just look at unusual art. Because, it is kind of an art comic. It seems to sort of tell some kind of sci-fi story, but it's not really too clear what that story is.
And that's like magazine sized or oversized?
Yeah, it's magazine size and it's $6.
Yeah, that's probably why I haven't been buying it.
It's got a lot of pages. I'm guessing it's 64 pages.
I definitely saw some critical raves for it.
Yeah.
So,
and I know this artist is planning to do, I think he was just self-publishing, and he self-published Hydra. and then Image has picked him up, so it'll be interesting to see Jesse Lonergan Lonergan if he does some more stuff.
Hallermos mentions Commandy. So, coming in late in the 80s, I had never read Commandy. I only read it recently, actually, and somehow I found myself with 2 copies of Commandy #1. So I just read the Kirby stuff, but everybody I know who was reading comics in that period loves Commandy.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah, and not just the Kirby stuff. I think they loved it all the way through.
Oh, I don't know about. I still haven't read all of the non-Kirby issues.
Oh, really?
I've only read a few of them. Because the art was such a shock when it wasn't by Kirby. I don't think the story had the same kind of momentum.
Yeah, the first issue, when I read it the first time, I was like, this is Planet of the Apes.
Yeah. And when I read it, I'm very aware I'm reading kind of a kid's book. But kids' literature can be great literature, and that's kind of but I can't really tell how much my nostalgia plus my just love for Kirby's style at that time clouds my vision.
Did you ever read Kirby's issues of The Losers?
I did, and I own the original copy, some of which I bought at your comic book store.
Oh, okay.
But it's been a long time since I've actually read them. I think they were odd, to say the least.
Yeah, they're a little underrated, but I always
nice.
I always reading those books, and also some of the DC War books. Am cognizant of the fact that those people saw some of these things, so they have sort of a veracity.
Yes, and we do know that he was in the front lines of Germany, or the invasion of Germany, France and Germany.
So that's always kind of compelling for me.
Yeah.
And those there's a Dover Books volume of Sam Glanzman USS Stevens stories.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever watched the YouTube channel Comic Book Kayfabe?
Yes,
Kayfabe.
I have. They put out a lot, so I haven't seen everything. But
yeah,
they
talked
a bit of their stuff.
They talked about them recently, but I had already had them, and it's the USS Stevens stories are Sam Glanzman's sort of autobiographical or mostly autobiographical stories of serving in a destroyer in World War II, and that Dover book volume is really, really, really good.
I've read individual stories. Joe Kubert was presenting them in his own magazine for a while.
Mm-hmm. They span all kinds of publishers. There were some from Charlton. They were usually like the second story in a war book.
Did he keep the copyrights to them, I wonder? Or
I think I doubt it. But I think to publish this book, DC didn't have any plans for it. It wasn't a main character, a main line. So they put together this life retrospective, and he passed away recently. I think about this one, and my friend Rick Parker, who is a comic book
right, and he's writing his own personal memoir, right, of the military experience.
Yeah, he was in the army in the Vietnam era, but he wasn't in combat, so his story is just about his experiences.
Right.
There, I'm very much looking forward to that because he's gotten a little notoriety locally because of Beavis and Butthead is coming back, and he was the artist on those comic books.
I didn't know they were coming back. So I want to backtrack on Commandy because it always interests me, but Hallermos agrees with me that just in perhaps the later Commandy past Kirby didn't really click.
So you're saying I shouldn't make a giant effort to complete that run?
No, although it won't cost you much money. And Gore Vidal says, sadly, Tim, is that Commandy is still obscure. And I think since I've come back to buying comics, the cost of Commandy comics has gone down.
Maybe.
I paid more 10 years ago than I would have had to pay now for Commandy comics. It's kind of sad.
Interesting. Now, how do you come down
Comac's
on?
a little more expensive, I think. Although Commanding #1 is still an expensive thing, but other than that, it seems very cheaply gotten.
I actually paid for me, paying $20 for a comic book is a lot.
Yes.
I mean, it's happened probably fewer than a dozen times, and that's one of them that I paid.
Commanding #1.
Yeah, I mean, I got a really nice cheap copy for that, but
yeah.
But are you a fan of Marshall Rogers and Steve Englehart's Batman?
I have only read an issue or two, and I don't remember liking them.
I have some 70s reprints.
They were beloved at the time, and now not talked about much.
Of 80s reprints, actually. That was in Detective, yeah. And then I was wondering, because I saw the same lineup on later issues of Mr. Miracle. Speaking of Kirby Creations.
And I own those, but I haven't read them yet.
Really, I've been kind of gathering those up and waiting for a read through, because people are always talking about Marshall Rogers and Steve Englehart on Detective, but I never hear anybody talking about their Mr. Miracle. And I did enjoy Steve Englehart when he was drawing Green Lantern with Joe Staton, who I also feel like was a little underrated.
Well, Howler is better. Tim Howler-Mouse is better at getting comics cheaply than I am. But I think I can get Commandees now for $2 when I used to feel like the average issue would cost me $6 or more.
Wow. It's all about being patient, keeping your list handy and being patient.
Unless you die before it happens.
Yeah, it's the quest, right?
I try not to worry too much about it and say, is this worth it to me? Will I get what I want for what this price is?
Right.
So sometimes I'll say, this comic's right in front of me and I want it. The price, I know I can eventually find something cheaper, but it's not too bad. So I'm just going to get it because I want it.
Yeah.
Right now, and life doesn't last forever.
At the end of the day, it's a comic book. So springing for more than like $20 is like.
Yeah. No, I almost never buy comics for more than about $6 or $7.
Yeah.
And those are the ones I really want. There's been a few exceptions, but like I spent more for the very first comic I ever read to buy a new copy of that.
Yeah. And also, if you have 1 through 5 and 7 through 9, then issue 6 suddenly becomes something you would pay a little bit more for.
I think I had to pay $20 to get hold of 2001 by Jack Kirby, the issue that had the origin of Machine Man. For some reason, key collectors think that's an important issue.
Huh.
So I can't remember if I paid $20 for that, but all the rest I paid like $1 for, even like the #1. But
interesting.
So there's where I don't like the speculators when they ruin
when they run up the price of the stuff that you're into.
Right. It's like,
well, that's what I love the dollar comics for. When Marvel suddenly publishes a reprint, a dollar reprint of that thing that you have a big hole in your collection for. So it's like fine with me.
I've bought ones that I already own the original just because it's $1.
I do too. Or
sometimes it looks nicer on the slick paper.
I throw them in a pile and put them in a box for my nephew in California, in Pasadena. Hello, Beck.
I have not read Scorpio Rose, but I have collected some of those out of dollar bins.
I remember it being published back. That was during the whole like Pacific and Eclipse period. Kamiko, those comics, which I have tons of those.
I didn't realize that. I guess I never read Earth X. I didn't realize Machine Man was my favorite. Machine Man is actually the one drawn by Barry Smith and Herb Trimpe.
Got those.
But I just, in general, wanted to have all the Kirby 2001s.
Barry Smith is excellent.
Yeah, and supposedly he's finally going to release a comic.
Oh, really?
I don't know if that was a false or true rumor. I guess it's something he drew for Marvel and then withdrew it, or Marvel rejected it. And so then he's changing it so it won't be Marvel characters and stuff. And maybe he's expanded it too. I forget which publisher said they were going to do it. Maybe Dark Horse.
Interesting.
I haven't read these Earth X and Paradise X books. Oh, there's Werewolf by Lunchtime. I believe he lives upside down to us in Australia.
Oh, goodness. It's probably the wee hours of the morning there.
Is he
right.
Monsters in 2001? Is that the Barry Smith? Maybe, I don't know.
Well, I am running out of steam.
Yes, it's late your time. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about nothing with me.
Well, I enjoyed it a great deal, and I don't know if anybody's going to watch it, but if you've never seen a Chad's Attic video,
yeah, I'll add a link to it for anybody coming in afterwards. But if you type in Chad's Attic on YouTube, you're sure to find it.
You'll get to see a picture of my cat.
You have a great intro, which you've stuck with since the beginning.
I have. I should probably shorten it up because it is a little long, but.
So I guess we have to look for Monsters by Barry Windsor Smith. Thanks, Werewolf by Lunchtime in 2001. That's not too far away.
Absolutely.
Barry Smith must not be a young fellow anymore.
No, none of us are. I mean, you are, but not me.
I'm a month older than you. I always hold my seniority above you.
All right. Well, we'll have to do this again sometime.
Yes,
and hopefully, we don't necessarily have to wait until the next time you come to Maine, because chances are I'm never coming to Oregon.
No, maybe we can more regularly do some hangouts.
All right, I'd love to. And tell Matt from Never Stay Dead that I'm a huge fan of that as well.
Okay, good. His ego needs the boost,
even though he's wrong about everything when you disagree.
Right, he's always wrong. Barry Windsor Smith is 71.
All right, thank you.
Okay, see y'all later. Thanks for all the great comments. Really appreciate that. And although I find it confusing to track comments and have a conversation, that's the way it goes on YouTube. It's kind of fun and kind of hard.
All right.
Talk to y'all later.
Talk to you.